Hey kids, it's JJ. How are you doing today? This is a quadcopter soldering tutorial. I'm going to follow this up tomorrow, I believe, with a quick build of a micro quad, because I've had two pretty big requests from my friends on the channel here. The first one has been, hey, can you do a build? Can you do a build? Can you do a build? And the other one is, what is the best way to do soldering? Everybody has an opinion, and a lot of things are subjective, okay? A little background on myself. I have been soldering since I was probably 8, literally, and I'm 40, how old am I? 42. I am a industrial robotic applications engineer, and I have been to 42 states and 15 different countries doing industrial robotics, primarily with thermodynamic applications such as CO2 laser, YAG laser, every form of welding known to man, and a couple of other things. But anyhow, primarily in the aerospace and automotive industry. So I used to do a lot of soldering for work. And I also started playing guitar when I was 10, and how I got into electronics actually was repairing and fixing guitar amps when I was a kid. Primarily tube amps and things like that. And I've built my countless recording studios, and I fix everything and solder and solder and solder and solder. But again, so that's why maybe, I'm not saying I'm an authority. Everybody's got their tips and tricks and things that they do. I'm going to show you, you can go to other channels that say, well, you have to have this and you have to have that, and this is how you do this and this is how you do that. This is quadcopter specific. If I were doing a video on how to solder audio plugs, or doing wave soldering for boards and things like that, or getting into the thermodynamic physics of wave soldering and things like that, that would be a different devil. This is for quads. This is for all of us that are in our garage and we solder and we like it and we do it and it's fun. You can go over to Joshua Bardwell, everybody's favorite yard gnome, getting an atomic wedgie guy, and he'll do an hour interview with some guy that owns a soldering factory, and you can learn 5 minutes worth of stuff out of an hour video. But unless you really see what to do and how to do and little tricks to do, it really isn't very helpful. So there's really only a couple of things you truly need to solder, okay? The first thing you need is a wet paper towel. I'll get to that in a minute. The next thing you need is a soldering iron. You do not have to have a really expensive soldering iron. This one I got off of, I don't even remember where I got this. This is a 60 watt variable temperature soldering iron. If you can get a variable temperature, that's awesome. If you cannot, then that's fine too. I have soldered with $10 Radio Shack soldering tools. I've used soldering guns, irons, torches, and I weld with robots for a living, so, whatever. That tip looks like shit. Everybody's going to say that. I'll clean that up in a minute. And obviously you need solder. This is my soldering station. It has a nice little magnifying glass and LEDs and all that crap. I have actually soldered XT60 connectors to this bar, so when I'm soldering a connector, I can literally just stick it in here and it holds it for me. It's a little trick I did back in the audio days doing studios. And then that's really about it. And I got my solder, my 60/40 solder over here. If you have one of these, they're great. Got the little helping hands. I am going to put it in shot so we can use it. See if I can get this out of the way. See if I can get this. This is half-assed. I do not do professional videos, we all know that. But what you're gonna learn here is gonna help you. So, I put a little bit of silicon tubing, like aquarium tubing or model fuel line tubing, over one of my alligator clips. The other alligator clip is holding an antenna right now. Does not. And the reason I do that is for circuit boards. We're gonna try and get this guy in shot, so I don't have to stress out too much about getting this. Here's the trick. This stuff here, which I'm not going to move my station again, this right here looks like a sponge that your mom used when you were a kid on the sink, right? And this is just gold bush. That's what I call it. You can clean up your soldering iron with this. You can buy this off Amazon or Banggood or whatever. Look at that. My oxidized tip now looks beautiful. Look at that. people get so anal. It's just like the rest of the frickin' hobby, you know. Everybody's like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this. No, don't get that anal. I have literally left this particular tip plugged in all night on full heat because I was drinking and not paying attention. And come in the next morning, I go like this. Bam. That tip right there has built probably 30 quads. So these little things are great. I think I bought like 10 of them off of Bang Good for like $5, something like that. If you don't have one, I'm gonna get this wet with some water real quick. Paper towel. Okay? Bam, it's wet. Get this back out. We whip out some solder. Bada bang. Believe it or not, and don't burn yourself, you want to wad this up pretty good. Works just as good. Notice all my splatter. Water and a paper towel. Look at how nice my tip looks. That's a little trick a lot of people don't know. Do not grind your tip. Okay, let's get to business. Two types of solder used. There's 60-40 solder and what is that, 63-37, whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's 63-37. And experts will tell you 63-37 solder is perfect for electronics. That's crap. Use 60-40 or the other one. That's fine, whatever. But 60-40 is the most prevalent. And make sure it's rosin core solder. You do not want acid core solder because it will eat through electronics. You want resin core solder. So we're going to jump right into this here. Always tin. If you're going to leave your soldering iron, leave it, you know, hot. Throw a little bit of solder on it. Just like that. And let it sit. And literally let it cook in the holder, okay? I do try to do that, and it looks all burny, funky looking after a while, but once you clean it and don't burn the shit out of yourself, she'll look good again, okay? So we're gonna go through a couple little tricks here. The other thing you need is a nice stiff drink if possible, preferably rum, 100 proof, works really well. And if you smoke, smoke them. If you vape, vape them. So here's what we're gonna do. First things first. Let's go about soldering an XT60 connector. A lot of people do this wrong. So here's what we're gonna do. Very simple to do. You're just gonna cut these off. Okay. These are all crap connections. All the boards I'm going to show you and everything, it's just crap. I don't use them. They're junk. This is just for display purposes only. Now, you can use a wire stripper, or I usually use my thumbnail, to be quite honest. Silicone wire comes off easy. The other thing you want to do, give it a twist if you can. It is not terribly important if you can't give it a twist, but it is definitely helpful. One of the things, I'm going to try to get this in shot. This is going to be difficult to do. You solder by the capillary effect, okay? It does not, this is not welding. I heard somebody that we all know doing a soldering interview yesterday or 2 days ago, and he compared it to the likes of TIG welding, and trust me, there is nothing even remotely close about the oxidation of soldering with the oxidation of TIG welding. That's when people that don't know shit talk. But anyhow, we'll let that go. So, the capillary effect, heat rises, and so do fluids, okay? So, what we do, we twist that to get the air out of it, if at all possible. Now, I usually take a splice of solder, and if at all possible, now angles are everything. A lot of times you're working on a quad, and the quad is in a bad position, and you can't do all these things. But ideally, if you can get it in position, great. I will put the soldering iron behind the wire and then add here against, and it will fill right up. Okay? Look at that. Let's see. Get in shot, baby. Get in shot. Bam. Now, what happens is when you're heating it from the back, you get the capillary effect, and it actually comes round to the front. You don't want to heat from the front because you're never sure if you've got it in the back without taking it out and releasing it. So again, we'll do this side. We're going to heat from the behind and basically stick your solder in the joint and against the wire. And then once your wire is hot enough, you should be able to put the solder right on the wire and it'll heat right through. The biggest thing with soldering quadcopter joints is you want to make sure that you get, that's a kind of a shitty one, but you want to make sure that you get both sides. You want to get all the way through. If at all possible, let me see if I can find another piece of wire. We'll just cut this one off. Do it again. Here's a good example. Okay, bare wire again, no solder. What you can do, this can be really hard to pick up on a camera, so I'm trying. You will see the center of this wire fill. And I'm not even moving the gun. Bam. Iron, sorry. And for your information, this is a soldering gun. Radio Shack, I miss you. This is what you use for heavy componentry. Soldering irons are what you use for circuitry, okay? Pretty simple. Now, that is one nice fully coated wire. Magnifique, perfect, okay? Now, since I got those uneven, cut it to the same length. We'll do this other side, because the whole point of this was to show you an XT60. And we're going to tilt this over. Bear with me here. I'm telling you, this is pearls, baby. Good shit. So, we get this in, bring it around to the wire, stick it in the joint, bada bing, boom. Beauty. Beauty, beauty. Okay? That's a beautiful thing. Now, that is a nice solid thing. One of the issues people have, whether it be flight controllers, XT60s, or whatever, you can see relative to my fingernail how long whack that is. It does not need to be that long. So do not make super long wired connections with your wire. You don't need it, okay? So now what we're gonna do, where did I go with that XT60? That's a shitty one. Hang on, let me see if I can get a better one. Ha! Hang on. Wow. I've got no unused XT60s. Look at that. That's a piece of crap. Alright. Well, let's just delaminate this one. We'll do a dually. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this. We don't care about the wire because we're taking it off anyway. We're cutting through that heat shrink. I reuse XT60s all the time, but I am buying some new ones. Now, it's almost the same principle with something like this. All right. We're going to use, where'd my tweezers go? Oh well, all right, we're gonna use this and we're gonna heat up the terminal. Let's see if we can zoom in. Okay, and it's gonna heat up reasonably fast. Now, here's a trick. That took too long, in my opinion. What you wanna do, thermodynamically, the more wire that you have in here, the more it's going to dissipate the heat. Here's a trick. If you don't want to be sitting there with your freaking iron all day, cut most of the wire off. That way it will not dissipate the heat and you can get it out much, much quicker. So I'm going to heat up the back side of this terminal. Well, we'll do the front. And that's going to pull right out. Well, if I'm not being a dumbass, it will. Okay. Boom. Okay. Easy, easy. Look at that. Now it's kind of a shitty looking turd, but that's okay. We're going to clean it up. Now this is going to look really stupid, but this works. Take it. Be careful not to be touching the metal. And you want to heat it up right in, put your iron right in the crotch. Get it good and hot. And then as soon as it's hot, do the same thing with the other side. Bam, look at that. Okay? Easy enough. Ah, shit, it's getting hot. All right. Now I'm going to put this in my holder. Maybe. It is very, very hot. There we go. Get this out of the way. I'm a musician, not a photographer. Okay, so there. Now it's in our holder. Here's what you're going to do. Let's pretend this is a brand new plug. How you would tin this: heat up the terminal, bring the solder to it, and you're done. You don't need a ton. You can heat it from the back side if you want. Good enough. Okay. Now, what did we do with that wire? All right, we're going to make a new one. I'm only going to use one because that's really all you need to know. I'm using my thumbnail, and it doesn't really matter how much you get. All right, we're going to do the same principle here. And you can also rotate the wire while you're soldering, if it's that type of joint. We're going to cut this down to a reasonable length. We're going to lay it right in here. We're going to heat up this joint and then press on the wire. There you go. That is done. Now, that's good enough. That can be totally filled. It doesn't have to be. Trust me, that joint's not going anywhere. Now, the melting point of solder, this is something that people get really anal retentive about. Melting point of solder is give or take on a 60-40 blend, which is what you should be using at least, is going to be about 360 degrees. But that's not to say that you want that to be your base current. All right, so you really want to be at about 410-ish. There is no right or wrong. If you, let's see here, if I can show you an example. We're going to take this old hub USB, okay? And this probably isn't going to pick up on camera, but I'm going to try it anyway. If you take your soldering iron, okay, and you leave it on here too long, I'm just going to burn the shit out of it. When you want to do it, it doesn't. And I'm going to add some wire. And I'm just going to let it sit. Basically, of course, it's not going to work for me. When you want to fuck up, you can. Okay. Now, you can kind of see how that spiked up right there. That is because you have burnt it too long, you've heated it up too long, and you have burnt the flux out, or the rosin core. In the welding world, we call it flux. Basically, and it's almost impossible to pick up on my camera, but when you're soldering and you get like a white, almost gray, non-shiny surface on your solder, that means you have burnt the resin core out of the solder. It's not the end of the world, but it's going to spike up like that, or it's going to look like a cold joint. It will actually give you a cold joint, so that is bad. You do not want that. So you want to heat this up, wipe it off. Yoink, yoink. Good enough. Now, something else you can do, which professionals are going to shit when they see this one, you can heat that joint up. Let's see, hang on, sorry. Very hard to do while you're, and wipe it off with water. Not water per se, but a wet rag, and it will bring it back. Now, what you can do, take some fresh solder, mix the alloy in, bam, you got it back. Now look at that. Notice it's nice and shiny. There's no raised up point, okay, because we mixed more resin core in, and you're gonna get a nice good joint out of that. Now, how I do boards, it's all what you're used to. I actually solder extremely hot, but I'm in and out very fast. Very, very fast. So if I'm tinning up a brand new board, like meaning there's no, just copper pads, right? If I'm tinning up a brand new board, I literally is like bam, 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 okay? So let's just assume this board is untinned. This is literally how fast I'll go. Let's see if you can, hopefully you guys can see this. Assume there's no solder on here. I'll go like this, like this, like this. Okay. Bam. Done. Now, notice how rounded up they are. Those have not, that is actually technically a cold joint, but that's okay, because what we're doing is we're tinning. Whenever you're dealing with pads on a circuit board, oops, that's not good. Whenever you're dealing with pads on a circuit board, you do not ever, ever, ever want to sit on there too long, because if you do, you could lift the pad. That would be bad. Now, again, look at the balls on those. All right. Very, very cold, what we call a cold weld or a cold solder joint, but that's okay. We just want the solder on there. Then we take a wire, and yes, I pretty much never use a wire strip. I always, let's see if I can get this in shot. Like this is silicone servo wire. I will literally take my thumbnail and do that. Then I twist it, done, okay? Then I'll pull my solder out. I'll give it a quick tin. Bink, bink, done. That's all you got to do, okay? Then, use your head. If you're going to, like this is a power distribution board, and if you have a flight controller on top of it, and this wire is going to be going this way, solder it so it's going this way. So lay your solder joint in there like this, or your wire. Don't solder off to the side, because then you're just going to have an unnecessary curl coming back over to here. So that kind of wastes time, but I don't give a shit about that right now. So what we're going to do, heat up the solder on the pad first, slide your wire in, done. Beautiful. Bam, bam, bam. Okay. Now that looks like crap because I already had solder on there, and it's just a mess. This is just to show you, give you an idea of how you're going to do it. If this was a brand new board, it'd be a different devil. But that's basically all there is to it. Make sure you pre-tin your wires, tin your boards, zap them in, and you're good. But if you, getting back to the point, I said I solder very hot and very fast. The reason I do that and can get away with that is because I do it fast. If you're new to soldering and you're trying to be really careful and all this other stuff, go on lower heat. And it's better to be a lower heat and have to waste a little time than use too much time and burn up your board. Okay, that's good advice, kids. All right. So, moving on to the next step. I think that one's pretty basic. I'm going to show you how to de-pin. De-pinning is a pain in the ass if you don't know how to do it. Like in this case, this had a ground 5 volt, and I don't even know what the hell this is. This was to program the OSD on this particular board at the time. I'm going to bend these pins up just so they're out of the way. This is a great trick, kids. Just pay attention to this. De-pinning a board. All right. I'm going to take a nice fine cutter. I'm a fine cutter. Okay. And then I'm going to cut the plastic bit, that plastic holder. We've all seen those. Okay. And when we cut these, that frees those up. Now, what you want to do, see if I can get this in shot, just like that. Let's see, make this better for you. Then what you do, carefully, and there's my tweezers. Okay. Then what you do, grab hold of the pin, go from the back side. See if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Grab a hold of your pin with your tweezers, go from the back side, and you will have success. This one's stubborn. Do this. Sometimes you do have to go from the front. This one's, there we go. It's done. All you got to do. Look at that. Bam! That's a beautiful thing. Okay? De-pinning is important because, like on my receivers, I will buy receivers, then I de-pin them, and I hard solder my wires to them because I do not like those little plastic connectors. I don't like pins. They're just bullshit. They break. You have to add a lot of weight because of connectors and crap like that. So there you go. Very simple to do. Now we've got, what is this piggy? Some F4 board I fried. It looks like an Airbot F4. Okay, this is a really good example on how to tin. Now, it's very hard to see. There we go, good enough. Because I took a Sharpie marker and I blackened this all out because it was a bad board and I wanted to know it was a bad board. But that's going to burn off. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how I tin. Hopefully this comes through. You're just touching the board a little bit and you're bringing it in. Don't worry if it's balled up. All you're doing is applying the solder to the board. Look at that. Bam! Like a robot. I have been soldering a very, very, very long time. So you do get used to this. You get like machine-like with it. So I want my solder balled up because that means I know I don't have too much heat into my board. Very important. Boards today, I think, are even these old $20 omnibus jobbies that I use all the time, are actually fairly robust. I can't remember the last time I lifted a pad off a board, and I fuck up just like anybody else does. So these are all pre-tinned. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, do you want to pre-tin or do you want to stick the wire in there first and then do it? I never do that. You can do this one of two ways. Okay, I'm going to splice this wire a little bit, take some of that dude off, and give it a little bit of a twist, and I'm going to tin it. Never tin over your board like I'm doing right now, because if you tin over your board or your motors, Jim, you can get solder into the motor or onto your chip pins. That's bad voodoo. You do not want that. So what I do, if I want to stick this wire in the hole, this is going to be almost impossible to pick up on a camera, but fuck it, we'll try. I heat up the board first, then I slide the wire in. Bam! Look at that. That's a beautiful thing. Okay. Nice solid connection. That's that right there. Look at that. That's beautiful. You don't get tighter than that without going to a Catholic school. That's pretty good. So now, what you can do, and I have been guilty of doing before, we're going to take another wire, same principle. We're going to cut it off, spin and tin. Hey, that's kind of cool. I'm going to copyright that shit. Spin and tin. And if, like I said, you don't want this shit too long. It does not need to be long. Make it small. Okay? Make it small. Go in. Touch the wire to the board, then apply heat. In this case, when I wanted the wire in the hole, I actually kept the wire cold. It was tinned, but I heated up the board joint first, then slid the wire in. With this one, I actually touched the wire to the board, heated them both up at the same time, and then melded them together. Now, this one, this top one, is not going through the hole. It is what we call top soldered or top mounted. This one's going through the hole. Is one better than the other? Absolutely not, no matter what they say. Now, the trick to these top mount jobs, make sure that wire isn't too long, because, where's my trusty pointer from, there it is, because if this wire is too long, it could potentially short out over here somewhere. That would be bad. So, you know, make sure this is nice and short. I am not that anal where I always make sure every single wire is going through the hole perfectly, because it is a pain in the ass. The thing you do want to do is spin that wire and tin it, and you want to get that as nice and tight as possible. Then when you heat up that, wrong board, when you heat up that hole and you shove that pig through there, it's like an arrow, man, just bam, right in there. So that's good math right there. Also, another thing that's wise to do that people don't think about is wire from the outside, the inside out. The reason I say that, when this is in your quad, it's bugging me. When this is in your quad and you start wiring these are your ESCs. This is my S-bus 5-volt ground, and then this is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4, blah, 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 or whatever this is, and maybe it's over here, it doesn't matter. But you start filling this shit up out here, it gets tricky, okay? So go from the tight side out. You got more room out here, kids, to play with. So wire in the tight areas first and work your way out. Trust me, it saves time. So there's that. I don't really think there's anything else I need to go over on that. It's pretty straightforward stuff. It's not rocket science. We did the XT60. Here's a trick. I'm going to try to get this in shot. I keep saying that. This is going to be fun. These boards, in case anybody wants to see or to know how to do this, this is kind of a fun thing to do. These power distribution boards that have the inset XT60, this one I had in a bottom battery mounted quad at one time because I mounted this upside down. Well, let's say I'm building a poor boy and I want this connector on the top. How the hell do you get that out? This is very difficult to do if you only have one soldering gun, okay? I, fortunately for us in this R-rated video, hang on, have a gun, wham, that I'm gonna heat up, and our trusty soldering iron that we've been using, and a gun. If you have two soldering irons, this works just as well. I'm gonna heat up this old gun right here, and this is an old gun, kids. I mean, I've been using this shit since like the 90s. And Radio Shack's out of business, so I guess I'm SOL on new tips, but that's okay. Okay. If you add a little bit of wire to your gun or iron, it will help it heat up faster. Okay. So I'm going to put the gun on one terminal and the iron on the other. My helping hands might not be strong enough to do this. You're going to see the resin bubbling. And I'm going to push with one of them. Bam! Look at that. All right. That, my kiddos, is how you get one of these pigs out. Very simple to do. Sometimes you're lucky, and if you have a wide enough tip, you can go right between the two and heat your rings up. The nice thing is, now I was applying a shit ton of heat to that, but that's okay, because I've got nothing close to these terminals. I'm holding this board just fine, and it's not burning me, okay? Now, if these ICs were up here, I would probably not advise that. And then you can clean these out a little bit, obviously. You can do, like I said, get it good and hot, get that ring hot, smack them out. Look at that rock star. Bam! You're going to be able to get one in there. Okay, that's pretty easy too. Motors, exact same print. Let me grab a motor. All right, here's an old beater. What is this? Maker Fire. Look at that shit. That's old. We're going to cut these off. Same principle applies. This is how I do it, okay? I literally take my thumbnail, pull, pull, pull. Done, okay? Then, take this guy here, and I take my wire. Let me zoom in. Okay. And I will literally put my wire on the side of the solder and bring the iron down. Bam, tinned. And there's also something we call stage tinning too, which stage tinning is when you literally put solder on the iron and bring it over. Now, the problem with stage tinning is the fact it will oxidize. You better be damn fast and accurate. So there's my motor. I will then take the motor wire, I'll trim it, bam. Now, see if I got a junker ESC. Hang on a minute. Working on it, working on it. Okay, here's a junker old ass ESC I don't use no more. Bam. Now, pretend there's not solder on there. Okay? Very simply. Now, something like this, these have dedicated pads, meaning they are not, well, there, we'll just use this side. A lot of ESCs that I'm running now, like the Bullet 28s, sorry, I'm not using this focus point like that. This is what I will do for an ESC. I will clamp the ESC. Actually, I usually solder the ESC while it's mounted on the quad. A lot of people probably poo-poo that, but you know, fuck them. Okay, so here's what we do. You heat the pad first, bring it in, bam, bam, bam. It's that easy. Don't worry about saturation or the spread because that is just a tinning effect. You want the solder delivered to the house before it gets there. Then take your wire, heat up the pad first, or both at the same time. I do this a number of ways. It just depends on my mood that day, I guess. But you notice what I'm doing. I'm actually laying the wire on there. I'm putting the soldering iron on the pad and the end of the wire is touching it. So I'm in effect transferring most of the heat to the pad because the pad has the highest dissipation rate because of mass. And it still gives me the ability to hold on to the wire without burning the shit out of myself. Okay, there you go. Look at that, that's a beautiful thing right there. Bam! All right, I say that too much, but that makes it fun. Then after that pig's dry, I'll take my conformal coat, cover this whole thing up with conformal coat to waterproof it. Bam, you're done. Okay. Maybe BAM should be my slogan. Look at that. Notice how my solder flowed out. Okay. Remember when I first tinned this ESC, it was in little bally, bunchy, crappy looking things, and once I reapplied my heat to my wire, bam, it flowed right out. So don't worry, don't get anal about the tinning process because the more tinning heat that you put into it, the quicker you could damage your components. Not that I care about that, but flux. Okay, where is all that shit? Hang on a minute. I've got flux and I've got whip. I really don't use this. People get geeky with it. I know, who was it? Blue Falcon, God rest his soul. I watched some of his soldering stuff just for fun. I don't watch soldering tutorials. I've been doing it all my life, so why reinvent the wheel? Excuse me, had to have a drink. But he was big on, I call them whips, but they're called solder wick. And what the solder wick does is it will clean the solder off of a board. Yeah. Now, notice this board. This is our PDB. Notice I got sloppy with this pig, and I had just cut the wires off when I uninstalled this from whatever quad it was in. So I still got wire chunks on there. That's called being a lazy ass. Here's how I clean these. You're gonna shit when you see this. Not rocket science. From the inside edge to the out, I heat it up, and I do that. Knock off my gun, or iron, sorry. Knock off my iron. Knock off my iron. That's how I do it. If you bridge a gap, here's what I mean by bridge a gap. Let's assume, just for fun, that these are not both negatives. No, let's do these. Let's do these. Here's our positive and negative of our 12 volt and 5 volt power supplies. I am going to try to bridge this. See what happens. You see that? Okay. Just drinking, your hot wife walks by, look what you've done. All right, that's our 12 volt right there. That's our 12 volt positive, 12 volt negative. Our 5 volt positives on this outside, our 5 volt negatives on the inside. Well, look at that. That's a bag of ass right there. You plug that thing in, poof. That dude's gonna smoke, okay? So what you can do, if you wanna get all anal about it, or Bardwell about it, you can take your wick, heat it up, stick it in here, and it will absorb that solder. And then you simply cut off this little bit of wick, and you're done. Honestly, kids, I don't use it. I bought it, I don't know, 3,000 years ago, and I've never used it. Here's what I do. If you bridge this, remind me not to use this power distribution board later, because it's not good. Oh, come on. The one time, right? Let that cool. The first thing I try, if there's no circuitry around it that can get damaged, like right now I've got a nice outer edge. I can spin my solder off and not worry about shit. But if this were an FC board, a flight controller, it might be a little bit tricky. A lot of times what I'll do is this. Ha! Look at that. It looks better than the one next to it. There you go. It's that simple. Or you got to be careful though, because if you put too much heat on things, like I said, you can fry shit, and I have fried shit. I mean, people, I think it's funny in the quadcopter world. You guys, if any of you guys watch my channel regularly, you hear me say, people complicate the fucking hobby way too much. It's like, oh, you know, my D term on this is this, and it's making pubic hair grow out of my motors, whatever. Sorry. If you're that anal, you know, and I see these guys doing soldering videos and all this other stuff, and they're like, well, you have to use this type of wire, and you have to use this type of iron, and you have to have a $95 iron that is got a, you know, varicet on it. It's got this, that, whatever. No. If these guys were that fucking serious, kids, they would be using anti-static bracelets and grounding themselves properly and shielding themselves properly while handling circuit boards, and they don't. So that right there, I mean, I deal with multi-billion-dollar customers with multi-million-dollar machines. I don't do networks. I don't do Wi-Fi. I do industrial robotics. And trust me, we use anti-static bracelets. We use all sorts of stuff for a $15,000 CPU board, okay? If these guys really were that anal, they'd be protecting themselves more. They're just being anal where they can because it's cheap to do on Amazon. But anyhow, that's my rant. What else can I talk about here? As far as tips go, the wider the tip, the more dissipation of heat you will get. So if you're doing really large joints, that's rock and roll. A smaller tip can take longer to heat up, and it has a more localized focal point of heat, okay? I use this tip for absolutely everything. If I run into a power distribution board such as this, and like that's taken I turned it down. This is taking a fair bit to heat up, in my opinion, okay? Obviously, I do not care about this board. I normally wouldn't do that. A lot of times, I'll take my soldering gun for really heavy gauged wire on top of XT60 connectors and things like that. That's what I'll do. But 9 times out of 10, for the stuff we deal with in quads, guys, you don't need a gun. I think I paid $20. I don't even think it was that much for this iron, and I like it a lot. It's a cheap little 50 or 60 watt. It does have a variable on it by Celsius. I just crank it most of the time. Use your head. There is no, I do robotic welding for a living. Trust me, every place I go into is a black art. Some people are doing 90-10 gas, some are doing 85-15 gas, and some are using this type of tip, and some are using that. You know, there's so many variables. Soldering's the same way. It's like, can I solder at 500 degrees? Abso-fucking-lutely. Just make sure you're fast. Can I solder at 365? Absolutely, as long as you take your time. You know, it's one of those type of things. I'm not saying my way is the right way. My way is the way I do it. So, take it with a grain of salt. I've got a video out there already that deals with soldering lipos and unsoldering lipos and the effects of that. I'm trying to think of what else I could cover for soldering that cameras, VTXs, things like that. You want to be really careful. If I have a video out there of how to put a pigtail on a video transmitter and how to go really, really fast so you don't burn up the board. That's really about it, honestly. Beepers. Let's do a beeper real quick. Those are always fun. I'm going to use the same wire. I'm going to cut this wire in half and off that, and I'm going to do this. Oops, shit the bed. Bear with me. I'm going to tin it real quick. Now, this is how I do a beeper. Very simple, but different, okay? Zoom in, let me grab a beeper. Bam! I buy these things for like 60 of them at a time. They're very, very cheap. Let me turn this. Does that help? Not really. Here's what I do though. Notice it says, remove seal after washing. That is remove sticker after install. But either way, what I do, look at how long those are. The longer lead is always your positive. The shorter lead is always your negative. If you peel the sticker off, you'll see a positive symbol right there on the long lead. So if you forget, you can just look there. Easy enough. Now, these are meant to go into a circuit board or a PDB. So what I do for a quad is I cut these guys really low. Bam, look at that. That's bad math, right? It's like, what did you do? Then I take the wires and I put the wires in the alligator clip. Let's assume one of these is red and one of these is black. And then first, sorry, brain fart. I will tin, you have to tin it. I will tin the beeper. Doesn't take much. There we go. Those are now tinned. And I will solder my little funky wires. Bam! There we go. Now, that is done, son. Now, what you can do is you can take, now notice I got rid of a lot of length. The reason I get rid of a lot of length on these is because, like, if I'm putting it into a micro, I do not want those long ass legs protruding down, okay, and potentially hitting, in this case, my VTX, or on my quads, like here's my Gobi, I've got it sticking out the ass, it's got its hole there. I don't want those wires or those little terminals potentially snagging a wire. So I cut the shit off. Then what I do, this is kind of fun, I take good old-fashioned conformal coating again. I just broke one. Easily fixed. Okay. I take my conformal coating, I conformal coat all the way around it. Bam, that is done. Stick it in there. You don't need to put heat shrink on it, nothing. It's finished, okay? I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything. I mean, I know I am. I'm gonna call it quits. It's been 45 minutes on this, and that's basically it. You don't need all the fancy shit, kids. If you've got a soldering iron, you can do whatever you want. A soldering iron, look at that tip. That tip looks like shit already. Look. Now watch. Wet towel. Pretty. Look at that. Ooh, you could poke mama with that. I'm telling you, these people that say you have to have this and you have to have that. Wet paper towel, frickin' soldering iron. That's all you need. If you can get a variable, this is a nice cheapie. Get it. If you don't, use your Radio Shack one. It'll get the job done. Don't get hung up on temperatures and this, that, and whatever. Just remember, you still have to be hotter than your metal core, okay? Because you need to heat up your base plate. Your base plate's gonna heat up slower than your metal core or your solder. But other than that, you don't need all the fancy shit. You don't need helping hands. You don't need all the stuff. Yes, I bought this off Amazon, this helping hands with the LED light, and it's like $20. And the only reason I got it off Amazon because Banggood was out of them at the time, and I think you can get them off Banggood for like $7. And if you look at this, excuse the, this is a great soldering station. It holds 2 spools of solder in the back on a little thing. It's got a little solder guide right there. Go see there. And it's got the LED light. Bam. That actually runs off batteries or a plug, which is nice. It's got a little place to hold your soft scrub, or whatever you call that. And this, you're supposed to put a water sponge in here, which gives you the same effect as this. Honestly, kids, I don't usually use a sponge or a wet. I usually just use my copper bush. It's not copper, but you know, whatever the hell it is. And then it has your helping hands, obviously. It came with the you know, alligator clips, and that's it. Pretty simple. I soldered this shit up. But great investment. I mean, literally, guys, if you have any questions, I'll shoot you links to great places you can buy this stuff. Banggood has, just type in helping hands or soldering station. My iron is totally separate. I mean, it's not powered by this. It just plugs into the wall and you set it. I am a professional electronics guy by trade, and I do not have a $200 soldering station. I don't need it. I don't need the babysitting. You know, use a nice cheap variable iron and your skills will get better. I'm telling you right now. So anyway, if you have any questions or would like to see me go over something that I missed, which I'm sure I did, it's a big world of soldering. Please let me know. Shoot something in the comments. I will be glad. I have soldered copper pipe. I have soldered circuitry that you can't even fathom, not to mention quadcopters. So I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but it definitely, my shit don't fall out of the sky. So it does work very well. Please let me know if I can help you with anything, and I will do that. And hopefully tomorrow I will actually get a micro build done for you. because people have been asking for that too. So until then, keep the shiny side up, have fun, don't burn yourself, and subscribe. Later, kids. Bye.